When Michael Turner was 16 years old, he stole a kiss from the girl he had secretly adored for years. Rachel Hughes and I happened to see it. The shock froze me where I stood, but he pressed a finger to his lips, urging silence, whispering that it had to remain a secret. I carried that memory with me for years. A thorn lodged deep inside, but life has a way of pushing forward. By the time he was 24, Rachel married Ethan Miller for love, while I walked down the aisle with Michael. He looked at me with a smile that held both mischief and promise, and told me that life was long, and he only hoped I would laugh more than I cried. I believed him, and I wanted to believe in us. 2 years later, Rachel reappeared in the crowd, not as a cherished wife, but as a bargaining chip. Her own husband had handed her over, as if she were nothing more than an object to trade for money and influence. Michael said nothing, his expression unreadable, but his jacket fell to the ground, his sleeves rolled up, and he beat Ethan Miller nearly to death. The rage in him was raw and frightening, yet when it was over, he lifted Rachel from the wreckage of humiliation and carried her upstairs to the highest floor. I had begged him to wait at least 6 months to let her face the reality of her choices before acting, but he only gave me that faint, cold smile and asked what would happen if one day I no longer had the patience to wait for him. His words pierced me deeper than he could ever imagine. When I first learned Michael had been in a fight, I was stunned, but when I heard the man he had pummeled was Ethan Miller, everything clicked into place. Ethan had just transferred all his overseas assets back to the United States, bringing Rachel with him to Chicago, and Michael had merely been waiting. That night, he drank an extra glass of whiskey, lit an extra cigarette, and finally turned to me with the most unexpected words. He whispered an apology. I shook my head and told him it was nothing, though. Inside, I was aching. I had been preparing my body for pregnancy for so long, and now I felt the plan slipping away. I told him I would stop trying for now. And though I smiled, my heart kept waiting for him to make a move, any move to show me where I stood. But he did nothing. Life went on as if nothing had changed, including the dinner party scheduled for that evening. When he told me casually that he would not be attending because it sounded boring, I breathed a secret sigh of relief. Tonight, I wanted him home, and I asked if he would like me to cook. He teased me, surprised at my sudden enthusiasm, but when I insisted, he tied an apron around his waist and joined me in the kitchen. His hand brushed the flour from my cheek. His palm patted my back, and he murmured that I had grown thinner. He added in a husky voice that it scared him to be rough with me now. I puffed out my cheeks and scolded him, but he only laughed and said if he could not pour his strength into me, who else could he pour it into? His words made my heart race, yet before I could answer, his phone rang. The name flashing across the screen was Daniel Carter. At first, Michael still had a trace of a smile on his lips as he answered, but within 30 seconds his face hardened, his eyes cold, and without hesitation he turned away from me. He spoke briefly, confirming something, promising he was on his way. His steps were long and urgent as he climbed the stairs, and when he returned minutes later, he was fully dressed as if for war. I tried to ask what had happened, but he pressed a quick kiss to my cheek, murmured that something had come up, and he could not have dinner with me, then rushed out. He did not give me time for questions. I told myself I would not ask, that I would not humiliate myself by chasing after secrets he would never share. Yet my eyelids kept twitching, an omen I could not shake. Too many coincidences lined up in one night: the canceled dinner party, the call from Daniel, his abrupt change in demeanor. I changed clothes and left the house, my heart pounding with dread. I did not expect the scene that unfolded before my eyes. The hotel room in downtown Chicago was chaos. A woman lay curled beneath a blanket, her face flushed, her eyes unfocused, clearly drugged or fevered. On the carpet, Ethan Miller writhed in pain, clutching his head, his body trembling. And there was Michael, straddling him, fist raining down without mercy. Ethan screamed curses, blood spattering the floor, while Daniel Carter tried in vain to pull Michael back. Daniel shouted that Ethan would die if the beating continued, but Michael shoved him aside like he was nothing. The face of Ethan was already disfigured, yet Michael's knuckles kept falling. My stomach clenched, torn between horror and a sick recognition of the rage that had been festering inside him for years. Then Daniel's voice broke through, desperate and raw, pointing toward the blanket on the bed. He shouted that the woman needed help, that she looked like she was in danger. It was as if those words flipped a switch. Michael's fist froze in the air, his entire body rigid, his gaze on Ethan like he was already a corpse. He let him go, and Ethan collapsed with a groan that sounded more animal than human. Michael stepped to the bed, his breath heavy, and with a gentleness that shocked me, he slipped his arm under the frail body and lifted her. Rachel Hughes whimpered, her arms rising instinctively to loop around his neck, her head burrowing against his shoulder. I stood in the shadows of the doorway, unseen, but I saw everything. I saw the way his shoulders stiffened, the way the tips of his ears flushed red in an instant. It was the same look, the same betrayed innocence I had witnessed years ago when he kissed her as a teenager. The memory surged back with brutal clarity, reminding me that no matter how many vows we had exchanged, a part of him still belonged to her. I held my breath, my nails biting into my palms, torn between stepping forward and remaining silent. My heart was breaking in slow motion, yet I could not move. Every detail was carved into my memory. The weight of Rachel in his arms, the tenderness in his grip, the raw fury still radiating off him, and the sick certainty that I, Victoria Lopez, his wife, was once again standing on the outside of a secret world that would never fully include me. The sun was merciless that afternoon, the air thick with the sound of cicadas buzzing like a fever. The classroom was empty except for one figure slumped over a desk. Rachel Hughes was asleep, her cheek pressed against her folded arms, strands of hair falling across her face. Michael Turner leaned down his tall frame, casting a shadow over her fragile body. His lashes trembled, the tips of his ears flushed red, and before he could stop himself, he pressed a furtive kiss to her temple. The softness of the moment was cut short when he lifted his head and his gaze locked on me. He froze, and for a second the world stilled. Then he straightened and walked away, his shoulders stiff, only to glance back again from the corner of the hall, where our eyes met once more. Now, years later, in downtown Chicago, chaos had erupted around us. Michael carried Rachel in his arms, her body restless, her soft cries muffled against his chest. Daniel Carter's voice broke through, desperate, suggesting she be taken to the hospital. Michael's response was clipped and harsh. He shook his head, tightening his grip on her, and muttered that she would not go to any hospital. His tone cut into me, and I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles turned white. I forced my voice to remain steady as I told him to take the private elevator to the top floor to use the secure code he already knew. He looked at me, then his eyes unreadable and heavy with silence. With nothing more than a low sound in his throat, he brushed past me, Rachel cradled in his arms, leaving behind a trail of dread I could not shake. Daniel hurried to explain his words, tumbling out in a rush. He had overheard Ethan Miller bragging in a drunken haze that tonight he planned to hand over his wife to another man in exchange for favors. At first, Daniel thought it was some vulgar joke, but then he saw it with his own eyes. Ethan had slapped Rachel across the face with his heavy hand, while grinning, coaxing her into compliance, and Ethan had only laughed along as if it were all entertainment. Daniel said he could not stand by, not when it was Rachel. His voice was shaky as he asked if I was all right. I inhaled deeply, my expression icy as I told him I was fine. My gaze fixed on the man lying on the floor, beaten, wheezing, yet still smirking. I addressed him sharply, reminding him of the stakes. He was a director, and if he valued his life, he would keep his mouth shut about what happened here. Not a word to anyone, not one syllable, or I would come after him without hesitation. He scrambled up, nodding frantically, fumbling with his clothes as he bolted out the door, too terrified to look back. I turned my attention to Ethan Miller. He lay sprawled on the floor like a broken animal, his eyes gleaming with bitterness and twisted amusement. His lips curled into a taunt, as I took a clean chair and calmly sat down my composure, a blade sharper than any insult. We had been classmates once back when he was all swagger and sunshine fearless, and unshaken the one who had somehow stolen Rachel's heart away from Michael. I remembered the way he had held her hand swearing in solemn vows that he would give her everything good this world had to offer. That image now was ash. His voice rasped as he mocked another man who had left the room muttering about his perversions about the filth he indulged in. Then his eyes turned to me, his sneer widening. If only he said he had pushed Rachel into Michael's arms sooner, maybe Michael would have been grateful enough to fall to his knees in thanks. His words were acid, dripping with malice, designed to slice at every wound. He leaned forward, his face grotesque, his laughter low and jagged. He said I had nothing to be proud of, that Rachel had once loved him truly, and that Michael had never burned with that kind of fury for me. Did I dare to wonder what Michael and Rachel were doing now? Alone together. His words stabbed, but I kept my face still, my silence the only weapon I had left. Daniel's patience snapped. He delivered a hard kick to Ethan's chest, sending him sprawling back, coughing and laughing like a man possessed. The sound filled the room, mad and sharp, echoing off the walls. I turned away, no longer interested in sparring with a man consumed by his own poison. I rose to my feet, my voice cold. Ethan Miller, run while you still can. Michael will not let you live after this. I know better than anyone how deep his love for Rachel runs. Others may not see it, but I have watched him for years. Watched the way his heart has burned only twice in his life. The first time was in our youth when Rachel accepted Ethan's confession. Michael had been sitting on the fence outside school, a cigarette dangling between his fingers, his gaze distant as he watched her walk away. I had asked if he was going to fight for her to try to win her back. He shook his head and said there was no point because she did not like him. I remember the way the smoke curled around his face, the way his voice cracked with something unspoken. I told him that if he wanted to wallow in heartbreak, then the cigarette, the tardiness, the climbing over fences, it would all cost him points. He had coughed so hard he nearly choked, the smoke tearing through his lungs. But even then he had grinned, the trace of a smile tugging at his lips. That moment etched itself into my heart, the boy who had always carried his sorrow with a crooked smile. And now, years later, I was standing in the wreckage of his choices, the weight of his obsession pressing down on all of us. I felt the walls of the room closing in the chaos of the night, echoing with every cruel word Ethan had thrown at me. My pulse raced, but my voice remained steady as I stepped into the silence, carrying with me the bitter knowledge that Michael Turner's heart, no matter how many vows tied it to mine, had always leaned toward the same unreachable light. Victoria, you really have no mercy at all. Michael Turner's voice cut into me, his eyes raw-rimmed red, as if he could break into tears at any second. I stood frozen, not because of his words or even his nearness, but because that vulnerability stripped him bare in a way I had not expected. Years ago, Rachel Hughes and Ethan Miller had both entered the same university, their lives intertwining with youthful certainty. And later, Rachel had married the man she loved. I had believed Michael would try to crash their wedding to steal her away in a desperate act of passion. But instead, he had dragged me to the other side of the world, hiding in Antarctica. Of all places, chasing the northern lights, pretending not to care. He had once asked me if he truly had tried to stop the wedding, would I have helped him? I had replied bluntly that I would not, that I was too busy. He had laughed softly, accusing me of being heartless, then added that if I would not help him, he would help me. When I asked what he meant, he had said he would help me marry him. At that moment, my heart had pounded like a drum, terrified my secret would be exposed, that he would see how deeply I had always loved him. Before I could escape, he told me calmly that he knew. I was struggling, that I did not need anyone's help. But if we married, I could cut 5 years of hardship from my path. When I asked why, his reply was disarmingly simple, because at that moment I was with him. My throat had tightened, and when I managed a small nod, he froze for an instant before bursting into laughter. Laughter so unrestrained that tears spilled from the corners of his eyes. And I had thought then that his love for Rachel must be beyond measure if he could laugh and cry so openly at the thought of her. Now sitting in my car, outside a towering hotel in downtown Chicago, that memory gnawed at me as dawn broke over the city. Michael emerged from the building exhausted, his jacket missing his entire posture. Weary as if the night had hollowed him out, he lingered outside, pulling out his phone, only to slide it back into his pocket with a sigh. The fatigue clung to him like a shroud, until I honked the horn lightly. He lifted his head, saw me, hesitated, then walked over and slipped into the passenger seat. I rolled the window down and asked if he was going home. He said nothing, only opened the door and settled into the seat beside me. I noticed a man's shirt in the back, its ownership unmistakable. When I asked whose it was, he replied flatly that it was his. The silence between us thickened until breathing felt difficult. I pressed him, asking if he had nothing to say. His lips twisted into a humorless smile as he remarked that Daniel Carter had told him I had handled everything perfectly. The hotel cameras, the staff, even the girl with the phone who had tried to record. He listed it all in a detached voice, every measure I had taken to control the damage, ending with a detail that sliced through me. Among the supplies I had arranged to be delivered, ice packs, medicine, food, there had been a box of condoms in his exact size. His voice was cold, so cold that every word felt like a blade. Was I afraid he would make a scene, afraid of a scandal, so messy I could not contain it? My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. I pulled the car to the curb and looked at him directly. I asked him to wait at least half a year, maybe even 3 months before doing anything irrevocable. His eyes narrowed, confusion flickering before he understood I was speaking of property, of dividing assets, of preparation for a split. The realization darkened his entire expression. His voice was low and dangerous as he asked if that was truly what I wanted to talk about, assets and division, as if our lives were contracts. He spat my name like a curse, his anger filling the car. I met his gaze, my own voice cold, and he laughed. Laughter full of bitterness that ended in a question. What if one day he could not wait any longer either? Then he slammed the door shut with such force that it rattled my bones and stormed away into the morning light. I sat in the driver's seat, face expressionless, forcing myself to breathe evenly. The ache inside me threatened to swallow me whole. What if one day he truly could not wait? I picked up my phone and called my most trusted ally, a man named Lee Fong, instructing him that in 3 months I wanted Michael Turner stripped of his wings, rendered powerless. On the other end, there was silence before Lee spoke, asking if I truly intended to destroy him, if I was asking for his death. I gave a short laugh, telling him he was overthinking it, that all I wanted was to set the entire world ablaze. I gave him 30 minutes to gather everyone and prepare for a meeting. That meeting lasted from morning until evening. The only person who truly understood my intentions was Lee, and he wore the expression of a sage, calm, detached, yet underneath his composure he was troubled. He followed me afterward, finally asking the question he had held back all day. What exactly was I planning? I looked at him and told him the truth. I was not planning anything beyond one goal. I wanted to break Michael's wings so he could never fly too far from me again. The words left my lips with a calmness that belied the storm inside. In truth, every act I was plotting was born not of hatred, but of desperation. I had lived too long in the shadow of Rachel Hughes, too long watching Michael bend toward her as if she were gravity itself. And if I could not win his heart, then at the very least, I would ensure he had no freedom to abandon me, no path to soar back into her orbit. It was cruel, it was ruthless, but it was the only way I knew to keep from shattering entirely. My heart ached, yet my resolve sharpened. If Michael Turner could not choose me freely, then I would cut his choices until only I remained. 3 months, half a year, those were only stalling tactics. Deep down, I was traditional, still clinging to the belief in one life, one love, one marriage meant to endure. When I returned to the house in the Chicago suburbs that night, Michael Turner was not there. No calls, no messages, no hint of where he had gone. My mind refused to stop racing. Was he with Rachel Hughes, comforting her, listening to her pour out her heart, promising to be her anchor? The thought burned inside me, rising into a fury I tried to smother. I whispered to myself to wait a little longer, that the time had not yet come, and then I collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted beyond words of my chest, a knot of tangled emotions that refused to unravel until sleep overtook me. When I woke, the world was dark. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, only to freeze when I saw the outline of a figure seated across from me in the shadows. My blood ran cold and I screamed, but then a low voice spoke, rich and steady, like a sedative poured over my panic. It was Michael. He rose and flicked on the light, his face pale, his expression unreadable. He asked why I was frightened. Who else could it possibly be but him? My breathing was ragged, my mind scattered. He frowned, noting the chill in my hands, and reached out, but I pulled away and turned my face from his gaze. Why was he here? Should he not be with Rachel, who had just suffered humiliation, who was weak and vulnerable and in need of support? Was it not said that the highest form of strategy was to win the heart, that seizing the spirit was better than seizing territory? Michael's laugh was sharp, bitter. If he remembered correctly, this was his home too. Was I suggesting he no longer had the right to come home? Our eyes locked, sparks striking in midair, the tension suffocating. I tried to walk past him, but in a flash he caught me, lifting me into his arms. His face was close, every angle harsh, and controlled his body taut with suppressed energy. His eyes burned as he asked if I truly no longer wanted to speak with him, if staying away one night meant I was ready to throw him out of my life. His words pierced, calling me stone-hearted. He mocked my silence, saying I had let him walk past me with another woman without a word, that I had not only tolerated it, but even prepared condoms for him in advance, that no woman in the world was as generous as I was. His steps thundered as he carried me upstairs, tossing me onto the bed with startling force. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a small square box. He held it up, eyes blazing, and asked if I knew why he had carried it with him all day. My heart clenched as I recognized it instantly. It was the very box I had purchased, still sealed, still marked with the tiny sign I had drawn. It had not been used. A rush of air escaped my lips. Confusion and relief tangling together. He began undoing his shirt button by button, his movements deliberate. He told me two things. First, that he had not used the box the night before. Second, that we needed to talk. But I demanded to know why he was undressing. His lips curved as he bent close, whispering that we had time, that we would talk after. The night that followed blurred into a storm of surrender and resistance. Every time I tried to pull away, he caught me, dragging me back, his body relentless, his breath hot against my ear as he murmured that what I had bought I must use myself. My hands betrayed me, sliding to his neck, tracing the strong lines of him, the silver chain at his throat gleaming like temptation. He was unbearably beautiful, and I was lost. By 7 a.m, he was dragging me into the bathroom, forcing me awake with water and a steady hand. At the dining table, I could barely keep my eyes open, my body aching while he moved with crisp efficiency, preparing toast and eggs, setting everything neatly. He told me to eat quickly, that he had a meeting at 9, and that we would continue our conversation in the car. When I muttered that I had a day off, he simply ordered me to come with him. His tone allowed no argument. I bit into a sandwich, my throat tight, unable to say a word. In the car, he kept his eyes on the road, his voice calm but firm. He spoke of the Miller family, how their business had crumbled years ago, and how Ethan had only made things worse when he took over. His return to the United States was nothing but desperation, begging for favors, debasing himself. Michael admitted he had not expected Ethan to sink so low as to sell his own wife Rachel, but that was the truth. Daniel Carter had told him everything. He confessed he had not planned to hide it from me, but the filth of it all made him hesitate. Then his voice softened almost imperceptibly. Lying was wrong, he said, and he apologized. But his apology barely touched me. The words slid off like water on stone, unable to reach the wound beneath. He glanced at me, saw the emptiness in my silence, and pressed on. He admitted he had beaten Ethan as I had witnessed, and asked if I thought he had gone too far. His gaze searched me, waiting for my answer, and when I nodded, he gave a grim smile. Then he told me the real problem was not Ethan, it was Rachel. He admitted he had carried her upstairs, had stayed with her all night. His words dropped into the air between us like stones sinking into water, leaving ripples that spread until they threatened to drown me. Yes, all of it. Michael Turner had the unnerving ability to read every flicker of my expression, as if he had been trained in the art of micro-expressions, catching the smallest twitch of my lips or flicker of my gaze and drawing from it the whole map of my emotions. Being laid bare like that made me feel stripped of skin, raw and vulnerable in a way I hated. I forced my face into a mask of indifference. He poked at me playfully, trying to disarm my silence. "Why are you still angry?" he teased, but I challenged him with my glare, asking if he ever felt the weight of what he was doing, if he ever grew weary of this tangled mess. He raised his hands as if in surrender, promising to explain yet. His words hesitated on the edge of his lips for so long that by the time he spoke, I felt my stomach twist. He said softly that when it came to Rachel Hughes, he could not pretend to be blind. My laugh was sharp and hollow. Of course, he could not ignore her. Not only had he seen her pain, but he had carried it, felt it, cherished it. I spat out the cruel story, painting the picture of the bachelor and the lonely woman finding solace in each other's arms of passion, ignited love. Rekindled a marriage broken. A destiny rewritten into some fairy tale, where he would protect her, win her back, and spend his life with her. I asked him if I should start congratulating them, now offering blessings for their perfect little family, their children, their happily ever after. But Michael shook his head, his voice steady, as he said, "It should not go that far, that what he had done was born of old ties, and nothing more, that out of compassion he might help her once, but not for the rest of his life." My fingers trembled as I pressed him further. And if she sought divorce, what then? He exhaled as if it were the most ordinary answer in the world. Divorce was common, it was natural. I pressed harder. If she divorced, then he would finally have his chance, would he not? His eyes flickered, and in the very next second the car screeched as he slammed on the brakes, turning to stare at me with shock and something darker. So that was it, he accused. I had let him carry Rachel upstairs, had left those condoms in place, all to give him the opportunity to test him, to catch him in betrayal so that I could file for divorce. His words cut mocking and dangerous, asking when I had started to harbor such dangerous thoughts. His face loomed closer, his hand gripping my chin, his gaze searing into mine as he demanded an answer. I tore free, spitting back my refusal, and his lips curved into that crooked, dangerous smile. If I let go, would I run? Would I leave him? Would I file for divorce? The very sound of the word broke something in me, and I struck him across the face. The sharp crack echoed in the car. He laughed, his thumb brushing the sting on his cheek, before he seized my face and crushed his lips to mine. His kiss was a firestorm, lips hot and demanding, his teeth clashing against mine, his tongue forcing its way deeper until I could barely breathe. He pinned my hands above my head, pressing them against the cool glass of the window as his breath came ragged, his voice hoarse with desire. He whispered my name like a prayer twisted into possession, telling me we would not divorce. His work consumed him in the days that followed, yet his eyes would dart to me when he thought I was not watching, as if daring me to contradict him. I kept my face cold, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reply. He nudged a glass of water toward me, ordering me to drink, but every swallow left my lips burning raw from his assault. The phone rang. Lee Fong's voice on the line was tense. He told me Ethan Miller had been hospitalized. Rachel had stayed holed up in the hotel room all night, leaving only an hour ago to take a cab. Her location now was near Grand Avenue. I was silent for a beat before a bitter laugh slipped out. This month I told him he had lost his bonus. He sputtered, bewildered, as innocent as a child asking why. I answered coolly that when the enemy is storming the gates, you do not wander into the forest to pick mushrooms. Then I hung up and turned the car around, heading straight back to defend my ground. When I opened the door, I found Rachel Hughes on the sofa, crying uncontrollably, and Michael at her side placing a glass of water before her, like some attentive savior. Rage flared through me, a silent wish that killing could somehow be legal, but of course it was not. I forced myself to breathe to keep control. Michael looked up at me as if I were his salvation, his eyes begging for rescue, pleading for me to take over. My fist clenched, nails biting into my palms before I loosened them again. I swept past him, my steps calm, and sat beside Rachel, arranging my face into the perfect mask of gentle concern. My voice dripped with sweetness as I told her everything was fine, that it was over, that she had nothing to fear, that I was here now. Her sobs broke open, and she threw herself into my arms, weeping like a child. My entire body stiffened with revulsion. I had always hated physical contact, and now every tear, every shudder felt like acid seeping into my skin, corroding me inside and out. But I held her. I stroked her back with mock tenderness, murmuring soothing lies as she shook against me. Cry, I thought. Cry until your throat tears, until your dress is soaked, until you exhaust yourself. Crying will not undo Ethan's betrayal. It will not drive him insane with regret. It will not save you. It will only ruin the silk of my dress. Still I whispered, telling her she had suffered, telling her to let it out, playing the role of comforter so perfectly that not even Michael could detect the venom burning behind my smile. Do not worry, I told her gently. I will make sure you receive justice. I told Ethan Miller to run while he could not as a threat. But because in his condition, broken and wheezing, if Michael Turner truly wanted to end him, it would be no different than crushing an insect underfoot. At first, I did not want him to die too soon. If he died, the place at Rachel Hughes' side would instantly be left open, and if Michael decided to step into that place, then I would lose both strategy and sanity. Instead, I wanted Ethan alive, clinging desperately to Rachel, suffocating her with his poison, so that Michael would never find a clean path back to her. That was my strategy once, but plans shift. Now, as Rachel wept herself to sleep on the sofa, her fragile body curling into cushions, I watched Michael peel grapes one by one with quiet patience, placing them before me without complaint. I asked casually, my tone light, though my chest burned, what he intended to do about Ethan. Michael did not raise his head, his voice calm as he asked what needed to be done. Was I expecting him to strike again to destroy Ethan's career, to drive him out of Chicago forever? I pressed further, asking if he would seek vengeance for Rachel, but he only answered that he had already beaten him once and that was enough. If I wanted anything more drastic, then perhaps I wanted him dead. And if that was the case, I should say it outright rather than circle around the truth. His words struck like cold water. He laughed without humor and told me this was a society ruled by law, not by my whims. I leaned closer, telling him plainly that I would help Rachel through her divorce, that Ethan would not harm her again, and that Michael should not take any step that would give me an excuse to lose control. He looked at me in silence, and neither of us noticed that behind me Rachel had opened her eyes again, silent tears slipping down her cheeks as she listened. I arranged for Rachel to stay in a vacant apartment I owned, filled with fresh linens and stocked with food. I told her to rest, that the next day I would call Lawyer Carter to begin proceedings. She looked at me with exhausted eyes, her voice trembling as she admitted she no longer wanted anything from Ethan, that she was finished with him, that she only wanted to escape. She did not understand how he could treat her so cruelly. Her fear poured out in every word, and I recognized it instantly. She was like so many women trapped in abusive marriages, unable to resist. Not because they lacked strength, but because fear had soaked into their bones. When the mask of civility falls away, the man becomes a monster, but still under it all. He is flesh and blood, capable of bleeding, capable of pain, though his heart is colder than stone. Later that night, when I came downstairs, I found Michael leaning against his car outside waiting. Sometimes I felt like a small boat adrift on an endless sea. No captain, no harbor, no compass. Michael, simply by standing there, seemed like a lighthouse, a port in the storm, offering safety without moving at all. He did not need to do anything, his presence alone steadied me. When he said softly, "Let us go home," I answered with a quiet yes, though my heart still ached. Meanwhile, Ethan Miller sat in his hospital bed, his veins taut with rage. He tried to hide the back of his hand swelling with blue veins, even as he smiled calmly when faced with Rachel's lawyer. He spoke smoothly, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, that his wife refused to answer his calls, that he only wanted to see her face to face one more time. He begged me to pass the message along, to tell her he wished to meet her. Later, Rachel called me directly. "Victoria," she asked, "could you come with me?" I had already arranged for a lawyer I trusted to represent her, one of the best in Cook County, a man who would handle every detail with precision. She had no reason to meet Ethan again, and I had no reason to attend. The words of refusal hovered on my lips, but something in her voice made me swallow them back. If she needed someone by her side, then I could not abandon her. If I refused, perhaps someone else would go, someone who might not protect her. So I told her I would come. She arrived the next morning carrying a small box of cupcakes. Her eyes lit with a fragile smile as she offered them to me. "I made these myself," she said softly. "Try one. I remember you used to love cupcakes." My breath caught. Did I? I had forgotten. She smiled again, saying she remembered the times Michael and I had once helped her with little things, with laughter, with warmth. I took the cupcake in my hand, my chest tightening. It tasted of sugar and sorrow, of memories too faint to cling to and too heavy to let go. I told Rachel that baking cupcakes was not necessary, that she owed me nothing, but she insisted it was her way of showing gratitude. She smiled shyly, reminding me that I had eaten them all as if I could not resist. I had no memory of such a sweet tooth, and deep down I knew the truth, that I had devoured them, not because I wanted them, but because I could not stand the thought of Michael Turner tasting something she had made with her own hands. Still I smiled, letting the past settle like dust. She said she had always been grateful to both Michael and me then and now, and though her words were soft, I felt my smile falter. Gratitude toward me was unnecessary, but for Michael, perhaps it was real. Rachel was delicate, thin-skinned, soft to the core, the kind of woman who drew predators with her vulnerability. Combined with Michael's attention and Ethan Miller's ambition, she had always been the focus of too many eyes. I remembered Michael once clasping his hands and pleading with me, asking me to protect her, to tell him if anyone bullied her. I had asked him outright if he liked her. He had waved his hands in denial, saying her father had been a friend of his own father, that they had grown up together, that it was only natural to look out for her. He had said it with such conviction, his reasoning sound, yet the flush climbing his neck had betrayed him. I took Rachel to the hospital where Ethan was recovering. The moment he saw her, his face lit with feverish joy, calling her pet names as if no time or betrayal had ever come between them. Rachel shrank behind me, trembling, and Ethan's eyelid twitched, though he forced a dignified expression. He thanked me for caring for her, but insisted this was a matter between husband and wife, asking if I could give them privacy. Before I could answer, Rachel burst out, her voice sharp and panicked. "There is nothing left between us," she cried. "I want a divorce." A dangerous light flickered in Ethan's eyes, but he smoothed it away, pleading with her, claiming he had never expected the director to drug her drink, that he would never have led her into such a trap if he had known. He reminded her that Michael had arrived just in time, that if not, anything could have happened. He admitted he was guilty, that he deserved the beating Michael had given him, that he was wrong, but begged her to punish him with anger, with words, with blows, anything but divorce. He claimed to love her, claimed he could not live without her. His performance was sickening, every word crafted to twist her heart. If she argued on the grounds of facts, she would already be defeated, because he played with emotion, not reason. Rachel wavered, tears filling her eyes as she accused him of handing her the poisoned glass, of insisting she drink to please Director Zhao, of betraying her. Ethan put on his most pained expression, saying he had only asked her to toast for the sake of business, that he had not known Zhao would swap the drink, that the true guilt was his, but his intention had never been harm. He spoke of how grateful he was she had escaped unscathed, swearing he would have killed Zhao if anything had happened. He professed his love again and again, claiming he would gladly die for her if she asked. Rachel trembled, her resolve cracking. I saw clearly what Ethan was doing, spinning lies both old and new, tightening a leash around her neck, keeping Michael tethered through her as well. I could not allow it. I pulled out my phone, meeting Rachel's eyes with steel. I told her I had not wanted to show her this, afraid it would break her, but she needed to see the truth. On the screen were screenshots from Zhao himself. Messages exposing Ethan's betrayal, flirtations, arrangements. Even photographs of the moments he had offered up his own wife. Rachel went pale, her whole body shaking, her eyes wide with disbelief, before she broke into sobs and fled the room. Ethan turned his fury on me, his mask cracking. Why, he demanded, what did I gain by ruining this? We could have been allies, he insisted. If he divorced Rachel, then Michael and I would finally be free to be together. He sneered, asking if I really believed that if Michael were forced to choose between us, he would choose me over Rachel. His arrogance lit my rage, but I held it back, my voice cold as I told him the divorce papers would reach him tomorrow, that he should sign them quietly. The calculation in his eyes shifted, his tone sharpening. If he was to sign, he demanded 100 million. My laughter burst out incredulous, but before I could speak, Rachel returned, her face streaked with tears, yet her eyes blazing with something stronger than before. She stood firm, her voice trembling, but loud. Do not agree to anything, Victoria. Ethan Miller. I will divorce you. I have proof. I am not afraid of court. She looked at me and I told her calmly that I could help her, that she was not alone. And for the first time since this ordeal began, Rachel seemed to believe it. Rachel shook her head gently, whispering that I had already done more than enough, that she could not keep living in my debt. She thanked me, her eyes glistening, and I could have sworn something in her demeanor shifted, as if she had finally shed a layer of helplessness. When I walked her out, she turned once more to look back at me with a grateful smile. Victoria, she said softly, I have decided to start over, to divorce Ethan Miller and live well. Tell me, what should I do first? I told her she needed a job. She nodded with determination, repeating the word like a vow. A job. Later, sitting in the car outside my house in the Chicago suburbs, I could not bring myself to get out. Michael Turner opened the door on the driver's side and asked what was wrong. I shook my head, unwilling to explain the chaos inside me. He leaned across to the passenger seat, picking up the small box Rachel had given me. My fingers clenched involuntarily, my chest freezing as his hand touched it. How did you know? I asked, my voice trembling. He lifted the box with a casual laugh, teasing that I should not eat them or I might end up in the hospital again. The word hospital stabbed through me. He reminded me of high school, of the day I had eaten a whole box of Rachel's cupcakes and collapsed with acute gastritis, of how he had carried me into the emergency room with one shoe lost, shouting for help until his throat was raw. The memory struck me like lightning. I had forgotten Rachel's cupcakes. I had forgotten that day. What I remembered was Michael's frantic arms, his voice crying out for me, his face burning with fear. His words twisted further in my mind. Ethan Miller had sneered once, saying that if he divorced Rachel, then Michael would divorce me. The thought haunted me, and I turned to Michael, demanding to know if he still loved her. He sighed heavily, then, without warning, lifted me from the car. I clung to his collar, my questions pouring out. Why had he held Rachel? Why had he not taken her to the hospital? Why was he the only one allowed to touch her, not Daniel Carter? Why had he carried her to the highest floor and stayed there all night, leaving me alone? My voice cracked as I told him. I hated him, that because of her, he had abandoned our plan for children, that he must still love her. My fever broke that night, burning so hot that the world dissolved into shadows. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my limbs weighed down, as if bound by stones, unable even to move my fingers. When I finally woke, Michael's face hovered over me, his beard unshaven, his expression haggard with exhaustion. Beside him stood old Quash, hands clasped, as if in prayer, nearly falling to his knees. "Thank God," he cried. "You are finally awake. I have been watching over you all night without closing my eyes." Michael waved him away, then called him back with a sharp tone demanding answers. What drug had been used on Rachel? Quach answered grimly that it had been an illicit substance not easily dealt with. Michael ordered him to contact Rachel to ask what she wanted done. He instructed Quach to bill him for the overtime medical service, but Quach cursed at him, saying he was insane. When asked when he had left the previous night, Quach answered 10, and Michael only murmured that it was nothing, sending him away with a sigh. Michael fed me spoonfuls of rice porridge, telling me I had been unconscious the entire night, that stress and weakness had overwhelmed me. Quach believed it had been psychosomatic collapse. Michael asked if I remembered what I had said before fainting. I turned away, my lashes heavy, whispering that it had only been nonsense, nothing to take to heart. He climbed into the bed beside me, wrapping his arms around me from behind, pulling me into his chest, as if he feared I might vanish. His voice rumbled low, admitting that he did not even know where to begin, but that he needed me to hear the truth. "Victoria," he said, "I do not know if I have ever told you this clearly, but I like you, I truly do. I do not know when it began, but I really, really like you." Those words carved into me, breaking my composure. My eyes, always so steady, quivered, my hands clenched beneath the blanket. He held me tighter, breathing out in relief, as if confessing had lifted a weight he could no longer bear. He began to explain the chaos of that night. Rachel had been drugged, led into Director Zhao's private room. Ethan had stalled him, deliberately wasting time, while Daniel, Carter, and he forced their way inside. He told me the scene was something I would not want to imagine. In that moment, his first thought had been to shield her reputation, to keep anyone else from knowing, and the only choice had been to carry her out himself. Daniel had tried to help, but Michael had pushed him back, insisting he alone could bear the burden. His voice cracked as he described it, his guilt threaded through every word. I lay silent, the weight of his confession pressing down on me like a tide. Outside the window, the world carried on as if nothing had happened, but inside our walls, everything had changed. He had finally spoken, and though I did not know what to do with his words, they would not leave me. Michael suddenly released me, and there was a sound of papers rustling. When I turned, I saw him holding something in his hands. "Victoria," he asked, "do you intend to keep the baby and then divorce me?" My breath froze as I stared at the document. It was a divorce agreement, the one I had secretly asked a lawyer to prepare immediately after our marriage. I had once told myself that if he ever wanted to leave, I would use it to bargain, demanding only one thing in return: a child and heir. The rest of the reasons, the deeper truth, were mine alone, and no one, not even Michael, ever needed to know. From the day we wed, I had lived with the certainty that someday he would let go of my hand. I thought I was ready, but 2 years of his tenderness, his devotion, his relentless protection had given me a dangerous dream of forever. That document had been locked away and forgotten, but now it was here again in his hands. My throat closed, my hands trembling, my words lost. Michael's voice was sharp, cutting into me. "Seeing this contract only makes me want to say to hell with your plan for children. If someone wants a baby, they can go have one themselves. Victoria, how could you? I thought you were after my wealth or my name, but you were aiming at my bloodline all along." His eyes burned with a heat I could not face, and I turned away, but he caught my chin, forcing me to look into his eyes. "Do you have nothing to say?" My lips trembled dry and weak as I whispered that it was not what he thought. His laugh was bitter. "Do you know how much it tore me apart? I drank myself into stupor, smoked until I destroyed myself. That night when I carried Rachel and turned to see you, I nearly collapsed to my knees in fear, terrified that you no longer cared for me. And yet you did nothing. You even handed me those condoms, as if you had already abandoned me. I thought it was over, that you never wanted me at all, that you were ready to divorce." He gritted his teeth, saying he wanted to strangle me, but he could not bring himself to do it. He said sometimes he wanted to end it to agree to the divorce, but other times he prayed that if we stayed together long enough, I might soften toward him. But nothing was as he imagined. "Victoria, you care for me too, don't you?" His words were fire, igniting a blaze inside me. His eyes shone, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks, tears filling my vision. For once, my reason could not hold steady. In truth, I had received more from him than I had ever dared to hope for. That night, I had not been delirious when I spoke. I had simply seized the fever's haze to speak what my heart had hidden. I had seen his glances toward Rachel, his gestures, and though I was not blind or foolish, I believed there was still hope. Only a fool wastes the chance given. But now Michael told me that what he felt was for me, not because of Rachel, but because he had thought I was the one ready to leave. It was me, Victoria. "You like me too, don't you?" he whispered as his lips brushed mine. Gentle testing, like waves lapping at a shore. My childhood name was whispered next to Man, a name my mother had given me before she died, when I was only 7. She had said life rarely granted true perfection, but a little fullness, a little satisfaction was enough. She had wanted me to live peacefully, to smile, but her own smile had been lost to despair, and she leapt from a building, leaving me behind. I still remember my father sobbing like a child, and then only months later bringing home the woman he had loved long ago, along with her daughter older than me by a year. She was the perfect golden phoenix, and I was the unwanted shadow. Losing my mother had felt like losing the whole world. I bit that woman once struck her daughter, and for that they locked me away until I nearly died. It was Michael who climbed the wall, who broke through the window and shouted to my father, "Uncle, I'm here to play with Victoria." That day I stepped out of darkness and into light, clinging to his hand. From then on I smiled again. Soft, sweet smiles that fooled everyone. But inside I had already promised myself one thing. One day I would destroy them all. That was the moment my mask was born. Every smile I wore was sharpened like teeth biting into someone's flesh, while I hid behind the image of the perfect girl. I was the model student, excelling in every subject, always at the top of my class, the officer in student council, the one teachers praised, and classmates thought approachable. I was also the dutiful daughter, sweetly calling my father Dad, in front of others, protecting his pride, even speaking kindly to the woman who had replaced my mother. I would smile and call her aunt, telling her to help my drunken father to bed, comforting her with false sweetness. I told her not to worry, that even if my father had other women, I would never let them step into our house. To her daughter I called sister, whispering with a sly tilt of my lips, "He seems to like you, if only he liked me instead." I would give up everything just to be with him. That was the way my smile worked, carving wounds while looking gentle. My aunt lost her son. Her daughter ran away with a man. My father returned home sick with infection. Through it all, Michael Turner was the one steady presence, the one who remembered my birthday every year, whispering softly, "Happy birthday, Victoria." He was the one who carried me to the doctor when I was hurt, teasing me, calling me silly, pressing candy into my hand. To a child starved of affection, a single act of kindness could warm a lifetime. For me, it was many times over, and it filled me until I could not imagine letting go, no matter what schemes I spun to protect myself. If I had never seen the sun, I could have accepted the darkness, but with Michael I felt light. I loved him more deeply than he ever guessed. Meanwhile, the divorce between Rachel Hughes and Ethan Miller grew uglier. A man stripped of his mask can become a beast without limits. Within half an hour of begging her forgiveness, Ethan was screaming that she was a whore, that she had slept with countless men. His venomous words broke her, and she collapsed unconscious. Michael and I rushed her to the hospital, and when I looked into her eyes, I saw something change. The confusion and fear that had always defined her were now mixed with hatred. She glanced at Michael, and I narrowed my eyes immediately. A woman without strength but filled with vengeance must seek power elsewhere, and she would look to him. I stepped forward, blocking her view, telling her not to dwell on Ethan's insults, reminding her that his desperation only proved his weakness. I whispered that she had evidence enough to call the police. In truth, I had already acted quietly, arranging matters so that half of Ethan's assets would be cut away. Why only half? Too little would not hurt him, too much would drive him mad. Half was enough to make him fear, to make him cautious, to punish him for every foul word he had spit. Rachel faltered at my words, then turned and buried her face in her arms, sobbing hard, apologizing to me over and over. There was no need for apologies. We all carried darkness inside. If even thinking of cruelty were a crime, no one in the world would deserve to live. Later, Rachel told me she had found work teaching yoga classes. She said she would move out of the apartment I had lent her, that she would try to step out of the shadow. I smiled and nodded, telling her to be strong. She added quietly that she thought Michael and I should be together, and she wished us happiness. Her words made me smile for real, rare and unguarded, and I thanked her. When I left the hospital, Michael held my hand. He admitted he thought I would say something to Rachel, but I shrugged. He said he had thought so too, but when the moment came, he found no words. To say too much would be clumsy, to say too little would be hollow. A man and woman should have their boundaries, he said, and he had already done enough. Anything more would cross a line. Then he smiled, mischievous, telling me he had skipped work already, that we should go on a date. His words sent a shiver of warmth through me. A date, I asked, startled. He stroked my cheek with a tenderness that made my breath hitch. Poor girl, he teased, has your husband never taken you on a proper date? Come on, let me show you what it feels like. My heart beat wildly as he led me away, and for once I let myself forget everything else. Our date was nothing extraordinary, dinner, a walk through the city, a movie yet. I felt giddy like a teenager tasting love for the first time. Then my phone rang, and it was my assistant calling, asking if we should continue with the plan to sideline Michael Turner. My heart lurched, and I glanced at him in panic before snapping at her, warning her that if she spoke nonsense again, her pay would be docked. After 2 months of struggle, Rachel Hughes finally divorced Ethan Miller. She had not gone to the police, but used every piece of evidence in her hands to demand a much larger share of the assets. On the day she received her divorce papers, she clung to me, sobbing like a child. As for Ethan, just as I had said, prison was not the only punishment. Director Zhao had never liked him, and in the world outside the walls of a courtroom, he would pay more dearly than he ever would behind bars. Ethan had the kind of face that drew attention, the kind of arrogance that left enemies eager to ruin him. And Zhao was not a man who forgave humiliation. I told Rachel simply to wait, that Ethan would pay. Michael agreed with me completely. What he did not expect was that Rachel's divorce would mark the beginning of my vigilance over him. I watched him closely, measuring his every move. Far from annoyed, he seemed pleased, boasting with pride that his wife cared enough to monitor him so carefully. Daniel Carter rolled his eyes at him, muttering that even a monkey could be smug, but Michael only laughed. When eventually I loosened my grip, he grew restless. "You are not watching me anymore," he complained, as if my absence left him abandoned. I told him quietly that if he found my attention a burden, he only needed to say so, and I would stop. He looked at me with pain, saying, "How could it ever be a burden?" Michael knew me too well. He knew that behind my gentle smile was the girl who had once stumbled through darkness, who had friends but few she trusted enough to speak to by name. Once he had asked me if I found life happy this way, and I had shrugged, saying it was not happiness, only the thought that if one day I disappeared, there might be a few people who would remember me, who would search for me. That answer had unsettled him. From then on, every night before sleep, he sent me a goodnight message, waiting until I answered before he could close his eyes. If I did not reply, he would climb the wall to see me. He wanted to tell me that as long as he was here, I would never vanish suddenly, that I would always have a hand to hold someone waiting. Michael once liked Rachel, he never denied it. She had been soft, fragile, the kind of girl who invited pity and protection. He had cared for her as anyone would for a wounded bird, but did that mean he was bound to her? No, he told me having her was fortune, losing her was fate. His liking had been real, but it had nothing to do with binding himself. He admitted he did not even understand why he had once been so generous, so tolerant. Now he only knew one thing. If anyone dared try to take his wife from him, he would fight to the death. He had truly let go of the past before coming to me, not as people whispered, not as a man using me to mend a broken heart, but as someone who had chosen. When he said he had forgotten, he meant it. When he said he had started over, he meant that too. He was a grown man, he said. How could he not be master of his own heart? The only regret was that the first person he had ever liked was not me. It left him with a faint sense of incompleteness. But when he confessed this, I smiled, telling him I thought it was better this way. That life rarely offered perfection, that partial fulfillment was already a kind of completion. He stared at me, murmuring that his wife was extraordinary, and in his eyes I saw that he meant it. Yet from my side, things were more complex. My watch over him shifted from open to hidden. I understood too well that control was a spice of love too much, and it would poison. Danger had to be anticipated, not flaunted. If it could not be done openly, then it would be done quietly. My assistant asked timidly if I was not afraid of being discovered, and I answered coldly that worrying about failure before beginning was the thinking of the weak. If there was a mountain, I would carve a road. If there was a river, I would build a bridge. I had long since decided that one day I would lock Michael away. Because within me there was a monster, and that cage was Michael himself, and the key to the lock was also him. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.